You're listening to
Go for the two, Joe Lisi. Hi, Joe.
This is Build Your Bankroll and Build Your Street Cred special diamond play catalytic converter, the whole kit and caboodle. I said it, not you. Me, not him, me. Gutless. They're going to run it, but guess what? They're going into a buzzsaw. All right. I said it, not you. Me, not him, me. Welcome to I Said It, part of the Go for the Two radio network. I'm Joe Lisi, and guess what, baby? College football is back. Week 0 on the horizon. Make no mistake about it, we'll be covering college and NFL action throughout the regular season. We have marquee matchups on week number 1, just about a week and a half away. I've been doing podcasts with Coach Bowden. Coach Bowden and I are going to be doing the We're Gonna Run It podcast throughout next week. We're setting his studio up. We're going to be putting out a pick show tomorrow night. Carver and I are going to be doing a weekly pick show for college and NFL action. So we have you locked and ready, loaded for college and NFL action on the horizon. Before I jump into a couple of odds, and I've been breaking down the ACC and SEC respectively, going to talk about all those games next week leading up to week number 1 Saturday. So we'll cover some of the games today. Thursday, Friday night action. We have Georgia Tech and Colorado. We have Auburn and Baylor squaring off. We have Stanford, Hawaii Saturday night. I'll be on College Football Today with Donnie Wrightside as well. Saturday mornings on Sports Grid, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern time. We have you locked, ready, and ready for kickoff. Locked, ready, and ready. I don't care. We're going to be breaking it all down. Prop bets, we have you covered. Heisman odds, all that good stuff throughout the regular season as well. News and notes, I'll just break this up. I just saw, I haven't watched it, but you talk about Harmon, first-round draft pick for Pittsburgh Steelers. He's carted off the field. I don't know the severity of it, but it's a huge loss considering the situation with Cam Hayward. How does that affect Pittsburgh moving forward? Not just in the regular season, but can they make a playoff push? Cam wants more money. He's not happy. They're an aging front seven with him and TJ Watt. This is an old team overall. I believe 8 or 9 players in the area of about 30 years old. This is a huge blow to Pittsburgh. Any way you look at it, you talk about depth, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They pick up Jalen Ramsey. They drafted Harmon with the hope that they could solidify that front seven. If it is, let's just say, a severe injury, and he's going to miss the regular season or any amount of time for the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's a huge blow from the season perspective. It's a huge blow, just big picture for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll monitor that a little bit later. I'll get you updated on my thoughts. You know how I feel. I think this potentially could be a team off the rails, especially with Aaron Rodgers. I said they have a better shot to be 6-11 than they do 11-6. This season. I know there's a lot of optimism surrounding Pittsburgh, but that is a huge hit to that defense, an aging team, and we'll see if they could regroup and live up to expectations. Couple of things in college football. 1, storylines. Let me get up the storylines for college football, baby. Nothing better. College football storylines. First and foremost, the SEC potentially moving to 9 games in the regular season. That's important. I talked about just having equality, right? And I've said this time and time again as it relates to the SEC, as it relates to college football as a whole. I believe all things need to be equal. I have no problem with the SEC stepping up and playing 9 games. But if we're bashing the SEC for playing teams like Mercer and Citadel later in the year, there has been one conference and one conference only consistently from basically the last 14 to 15 years that has stepped up in a week 1 type of landscape and played the big boys. And we're talking about Georgia and LSU and Alabama, all those teams. Alabama for years under Nick Saban played teams like Wisconsin and USC and all the big boys week number 1. West Virginia, that was actually one of the games that actually covered was West Virginia back in the day as a 26.5 point dog in Atlanta. They actually covered against Alabama, but Alabama would just boat race every top 25 opponent. Virginia Tech, they beat over a couple of seasons over a 15-year period. The SEC in a week 1 environment has always stepped up and played top 10 and top 15 and top 20 opponents each and every year. Look at the Georgia Bulldogs. They open up against Cade Klubnik and Clemson. They win that matchup 34-3. 2 years ago, they beat up on Dan Lanning in Oregon. You talk about Georgia playing just top 25 talent. I remember years ago with Les Miles and LSU squaring off against the Oregon Ducks. I mean, the SEC used to fear nobody and still does. When you look at the matchups, Texas now in the conference squaring off against Ohio State. You talk about Alabama and Florida State. That's a matchup that Alabama needs to step up and make a statement. Florida State with their backs against the wall. And obviously that matchup in Death Valley. You know, LSU, Clemson, whoever wins that game solidifies themselves potentially as a top 5 opponent, of top 5 team for the whole year. For basically, they have a flyer. Whoever wins that game and matchup in Death Valley, they separate themselves from the pack early on. And that's what you want. You want to create separation, right? We talk about having the ability to look in early November and say, we're already in because of our body of work. We've clinched an SEC berth. We know we're going to be there to play for a championship, and we're going to solidify one of the top 12 teams. That's what these games give you the ability to do. Now, on the flip side, you lose and you get smacked in the teeth and you lose by double digits. Well, now you're up against it just the way the Ohio State Buckeyes were last year. They lose the last regular season game to Michigan, don't play in a Big Ten championship, and somehow, some way, they found their way into the playoff and won a national championship. They found a way. Now, they needed help. They didn't do it on their own, but when they had their second opportunity, they ran through every opponent that they faced. That's what you want to see for the regular season in college football. That's what you want to see play out each and every week and every Saturday that we watch these games. Okay? And you can make the argument, and I've said it, SEC has done it better than anybody. Body of work. They haven't won a national championship in 2 straight years. That belongs to Michigan and Ohio State in the Big Ten. They are the conference to beat right now. They are the team. They are the teams with the bullseye on their back. Which Big Ten team is going to step up? We see it right there just from the perspective, right? We just see it. Texas, Ohio State, Penn State. Can James Franklin answer the bell? Can he get off the mat and answer the bell? Oregon and Dante Moore, where are they going to be this year? What's going to be the situation for that team? A lot of question marks in the Big Ten. A lot of question marks around all of these teams. You look at Penn State, they're ranked 3rd because they have a returning quarterback from an experience perspective and the 2 most experienced running backs, similar to what Ohio State had last year with Will Howard. Now, granted, he wasn't on Ohio State. He transferred in from Kansas State, but he was a veteran quarterback with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. And oh, by the way, had the best wide receiver with Ryan Williams in all of college football in Jeremiah Smith. That's why Penn State is there. They're not there because of their body of work and their resume. We know that James Franklin in a big spot is a choke artist. He hasn't stepped up. Can he do it now? Number 3 overall. Schedule lines up. He gets Oregon at home. We'll see. We will see Drew Aller in a big spot that is yet in his career to step up and beat a dominant opponent. I'm not talking about Luke Altmaier and Brett Bielema. Big bad Brett. Big bad Brett Bielema. We beat Brett Bielema as a 18.5-point favorite. We won by 14. We didn't cover, but we won. I'm not talking about those games. I'm not talking about beating Minnesota and PJ Fleck. Roll the boat, PJ. Throw me the ball, Gino. I'm not talking about those games. I'm talking about when it matters, when you have a 10-point lead against the Ohio State Buckeyes and their battered offensive line and their team is basically limping, walking in, and you have a 10-point lead, and the game now is 20-13, and the game is on the line, and Drew Aller looks like a deer in the headlights. He can't complete a pass. I mean, is it any different than what Christian Hackenberg and Sean Clifford had? Stop making Drew Aller out like he's the second coming of Joe Burrow. He's not. Until he proves it, He's not. He didn't even complete a pass outside of Tyler Warren last year to a wideout in the biggest game of his life. His best game, you could say, is the Big Ten loss to Oregon. Okay, it's all right, Joe. Just you wait. He's going to do it this year. Okay, all right. James Franklin, best resume came when he put back-to-back 9-4 records with Vanderbilt and that team. That's the bottom line. And Jordan Rodgers and Zach Stacy and those teams that he put together. And I'm not talking about off the field Zach Stacy. I'm talking about when he was the running back of Vanderbilt in Nashville. The football player, not the person. Let's call it what it is. James Franklin is a great coach when he plays teams sub 500 or teams when he's laying double digits that has no shot to win a national championship. Go on the road and beat a top 10 opponent? Good luck. Good luck. That is the problem when we break down these teams. You can make the argument quarterback-wise out of all these top 25 teams. There's all question marks. Arch Manning, Heisman. I need to see Arch step up against the likes of Georgia. I need to see Arch Manning step up in a big spot in an SEC championship game potentially against a top 10 opponent. I'm not talking about UL Monroe or Mississippi State where you get them in Austin and you got a beaten down team led by Jeff Lebby. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a top 10 opponent. Show me Arch Manning in a big spot. He's got every opportunity going into the horseshoe against a dominant team, dominant in Ohio State, a team that has basically over a 900 winning percentage at home over the past basically 10 years. All the great teams win at home. All of them. They win their home games. If you can't win at home, you have problems. That is a major cause of concern. For years, James Franklin in Happy Valley had basically over 830 winning percentage at home. And he would beat Michigan every time they came to Beaver Stadium. But when Ohio State walks in there, it's a different story. Doesn't matter. He can't step up. They don't play well. They cover, but they don't play well and get the outright victory. And those are the concerns moving forward for all of these teams in 2025. Dante Moore, I don't know what quarterback we're getting for Oregon. Are we getting the Dante Moore that came out of high school as the 5-star athlete and the 5-star recruit? Or are we getting the guy that was the deer in the headlights against Oregon State for UCLA and threw 2 pick sixes and basically cost his team the cover and the win on the road in Corvallis? Give me that. Is that the quarterback that we're getting? I don't know, because he said Chip Kelly didn't teach him anything. We'll see if Dan Lanning and that offensive staff step up. There are a number of different storylines for week 1 and just statistics. And we'll break out the stats in the ACC. Now, I apologize. I've been breaking down a lot of stuff with Coach, but I'll throw up the Clemson game. We're not going to break down the Clemson game against LSU. That's on the horizon. I'll give you a little taste about how that game potentially could play out. We have that game, LSU and Clemson on deck. We also have Miami and Notre Dame on deck in the ACC, 2 make it or break it games for both of those teams. The first is Clemson, and we just talk about the dominance for the Clemson Tigers. I want people to understand why they're the number 4th ranked team in the nation. They come and return Cade Klubnik. He threw 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He beat teams with his arm. He also beat teams with his legs. And that offense finally turned the corner. And you saw glimpses of that. Forget the regular season. You saw a really good test against now the number 1 team in the nation, the Texas Longhorns. That offense basically went toe-to-toe with Quinn Ewers and the Texas offense. If it wasn't for Cade Klubnik and the team not converting on a 4th and goal, basically inside the 5-yard line, they cover that game. It was right on the spread at 14 points. They lost it in Austin. It could have been a 7-point game if they converted that 4th and goal. They didn't, and that's why Texas was able to win. But if we're looking big picture and we're looking Clemson overall, and can they take the next step? Obviously, they have to win week number 1. I know that. But we're talking about a team that's 78-9 straight up in the ACC since 2015. 78-9. That is a dominant record in the conference. We talk about Dabo Swinney as a head coach. 180-47. 180-47. That's a 793 winning percentage. We talk about Clemson, 70-5 straight up at home since 2015 in Death Valley. That's a 933 winning percentage for Clemson. Now, two of those losses, and we'll talk about it, came last year to Louisville and South Carolina. So did they regress? That's the question, right? We talk about, you look at those games, they got beat up in the trenches by Louisville. Louisville rushed for over 7 yards per carry in the 11-point home win over Clemson, right? They were a road dog. They were catching, I believe, 9.5, 10 points, and they won the ball game outright with Tyler Shuck and that offense of Isaac Brown and Ja'Cory Brooks. Brooks is gone. Brown returns this year. They allowed 7 yards per carry. In the matchup against South Carolina just played rope-a-dope with them. They wore them out. They waited for their opportunity, and Lenore Sellers led his team on a game-winning drive in the fourth quarter. When we talk about how Clemson has played over the past, let's say, 8 years, and you think about Clemson, two things for me stand out. We're talking Clemson, Deshaun Watson. We're talking Clemson, Trevor Lawrence, the years that they won national championships. Their rushing attack was in the area of about 240 rushing yards per game. They had dual offensive coordinators, Jeff Scott, then they had Tony Elliott. They were dual. Both of those coaches went on to coach USF and Virginia, respectively. Since that time, Clemson, and both of those coordinators are out the door, has not rushed for over 200 yards in a season dating back to 2019. Now, part of it last year with the clock, I get that. The quarterback development, the team isn't as dominant. That's a cause of concern. But we just talk about it. They're 60 yards off offensively from running the football where they were in the heyday, the pinnacle of Clemson Tiger football. The other area is in run support defensively. They gave up 162 rushing yards per game last year. The two games that they lost, they allowed Louisville to rush for over 200 and Texas to run for over 200. Two most important games, basically. They had a fight for their life against SMU. That's one of the worst rushing defenses under Dabo Swinney since the days of Brett Venables. Now, Tom Allen is here. He's supposed to elevate the defense, and he did that with Penn State. But that defense for Penn State wasn't broken. Manny Diaz and all the former coordinators, Brent Pry, statistically had the Penn State defense in the top 30. They weren't a garbage unit. They just fine-tuned them. Can Tom Allen in year one fix the Clemson front seven to make them give up only in the area of 100 rushing yards per game? Can they get that third down defense down in the area of 30 to 31%? If so, they're going to be there. We have to see. I'm not so sure. I don't know just yet. We talk about the dominance in the ACC, right? We talk about their record in the conference last year, 8-1 overall. They won those 8 games in the conference by an average against FBS opponents, right? By an average margin of victory of 16.8 points per game. They won all of their FBS games by an average margin of victory of 18.8 points per game. And when I break down the stats, I don't like to use, I only use FBS, unless it's a factor where a team loses against an FCS opponent, because they could get skewed, right? You throw in a home record. Oh, yeah, they're 30-0, and they played 5 FCS opponents and won those games by 30-plus points per game. Well, now all of a sudden their margin of victory is skewed, right? It's larger than what it should be. I take the body of work from the FBS perspective. I want to see those teams that are stronger from an FPI schedule perspective, top 20 and top 30 talent perspective. How did the team perform then? And then let's break it down. And let's break it down numbers-wise, right? Can teams win on the road? That's always a huge cause of concern. Miami. We talk about Miami and the dominance. I've heard it from every Miami Hurricane fan, right? Oh, Canes are back to you, baby. Mario Cristobal, big chest, I eat iron. and I crap steal a Mario. All right. You had your second double-digit winning season since 2003. Very good, Mario. But you lost to Georgia Tech and, more importantly, Syracuse down the stretch. That cost you a shot at the college football playoff. And we've seen this play out back in 2017. Mark Richt and the Hurricanes were right there. They were undefeated. They walked in to Pittsburgh, and at the time, Heinz Field, and they got smacked around by Kenny Pickett and Pat Narduzzi. Beat the Hurricanes on an early Saturday afternoon. I think Pitt was a 12.5, 13-point favorite. That aside, Miami, we're not talking about the days of Jonathan Vilma, Willis McGahee, Frank Gore. Can we stop? We don't have Butch Davis and the days of Larry Coker. And I mean, come on. We're not there. I mean, C.J. Daniels, could he live up to the expectations of Mike Irvin? I don't know. Let's see. Can he do it? I hope so, because we got to stop. The defense for years, under all of those coaches, and throw in Manny Diaz as well, has been terrible. They haven't been physical. They don't want to tackle. This is not the heyday of Miami Hurricane football, okay? And we keep going back to the 3 games they lost. Forget the Iowa State game. They checked out. You can't even worry about bowl games when we're talking about players checking out, especially in today's college football. I'm talking about the 2 games that mattered, Syracuse and Georgia Tech. Syracuse, they gave up 70% on third downs last year in that loss. They gave up 64% on third downs to Haynes King and that team. Terrible. They gave up basically 42% on third down conversions as a defensive unit. Carson Beck, he's a great pocket passer. In no way, shape, or form is Carson Beck as elusive as Cam Ward. And why is that important? Yeah, he could throw when he has a clean pocket. Yeah, he could do that. Carson Beck is the man. But guess what? Here's the problem. Miami converted 56% on third down conversions last year. Okay? About maybe 16%, 20% was due to Cam Ward breaking contain, keeping his eyes down the field, extending plays with his pocket presence. You have the Statue of Liberty back there in Carson Beck. You think the offense is with Mark Fletcher and that rushing attack is going to average 56% on third down conversions? Get real. That's the problem when we talk big picture about Miami and we talk big picture about this team. 4 starters start week 1. I told you I broke this game down. The hardest thing, and I talked to Coach Bowden and I talked to coaches, and I'm a former high school and defensive back, and that's where I was recruited for college. But the point is this. When you talk about being able to communicate week 1 against a new quarterback and an offense or a top 25 team, they're going to force you, hopefully in Notre Dame, to read formation, read coverage, communicate between the safeties and the cornerbacks and the nickelbacks. And they have 4 transfers coming in that secondary, and a new defensive coordinator with a different scheme. How is that going to match up against C.J. Carr? Hopefully Marcus Freeman and the offensive staff can show different types of motion and show different types of looks to confuse the secondary week 1 in a big matchup. Doesn't matter that it's on the road. That's got to be the key. If you're breaking tendency in a week 1 matchup, you show formations you haven't shown before as it relates to the running game and as it relates to the passing attack. And that's how you have success. And we're going to monitor the CJ Carr stats and props throughout all of next week to see how they move. Because I lean to Notre Dame in that matchup. I don't care that they're 0-6 the last 6 times that they played Miami. I don't care about that. It comes down to personnel and where I believe that the game is won or lost, and that's in the trenches, and I give the edge to Notre Dame. A couple other stats that I found interesting for these week 1 matchups. Stanford on the road against Hawaii. Now, this game played out a couple of years ago, right? We saw Troy Taylor and Ashton Daniels go into Hawaii. They won that matchup, I believe, by 11 or 12 points. Right now, they're catching 2.5 against the Hawaii team that was 4-3 last year at home. Now, 2 of those losses at home for Hawaii came by a total of 5 points. They lost week 1 to Deshaun Foster and UCLA 16-13. They lost later in the year to UNLV, another bowl team, by only 2 points at home. So they played pretty well. And the game that they lost against Boise State, another college football playoff contender, those 2 bowl games and losses, they lost by 21. Not a bit. They didn't lose by 35. I think they deserve to be favored here, and I'm not sold on Frank Reich. So they get Ben Gulbranson that comes over. Stanford does, quarterback from Oregon State. 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. It's a new scheme. Hopefully Frank Reich, the hope is to have a balanced offense and at least coach up the quarterback position. Couldn't do it in the NFL, but good old Frank Reich, we're going to coach him up. He might, we're going to run it. And that is where I think when you look at Stanford and you look at where they were lost, and I said this, you can go back to the tape. I was there with a couple of gurus. I thought David Shaw back in 2016, 2017 was starting to regress. And all I heard was, oh, you're crazy. You're crazy. He's a great recruiter. The identity of Stanford was to run the football, win the turnover battle, and they slowly lost talent on the offensive line, and they slowly failed to run the football effectively and then had a change in a wide-open Pac-12 that was pass-heavy. And David Shaw was not built for that, and that's why he's no longer coaching college. But when you look at Stanford as a whole, they only average 132 rushing yards per game, average around 191 yards in the passing attack. Can they get this in the area of 250, 260 this year? That remains to be seen. That remains to be seen. Can they elevate this offense, and can Frank Reich coach up the young talent? It's a different animal. Again, I keep going back. Couldn't coach up young talent in Indianapolis, especially at the quarterback position. It was his way or no way. He was continuously forcing the square peg into the round hole, and that's why he's no longer coaching in the NFL. But if we're looking at Timmy Chang and we're looking at Hawaii, and again, Hawaii only averaged 3.4 yards per carry, 97 rushing yards per game. They averaged 268, but they have a redshirt freshman quarterback, Micah Alejado. Okay, I watched some film on him. He's a lefty. He could spin it. He's right now considered the starter. But you got to believe that Hawaii tries to attack the secondary for Stanford over the top. This is secondary in Stanford last year that gave up 280 passing yards per game against opponents. They gave up 4 games where they gave up over 300 yards passing. They were 1-3 in those matchups, and I understand different scheme. I get that. They lost those 3 games by an average margin of defeat of 13.3 points per game. That is going to be the matchup for Hawaii overall. With a redshirt freshman quarterback, can they step up, challenge it over the top? Can that defense be opportunistic playing at home? Total, I think we've seen fluctuate 52.5 down to 50.5. I like the over. I like Hawaii in that matchup early on. I'm going to see how the early games play out in a little bit limited action, but that's the way I lean right now. I think that's the way you got to go. And we'll see. It's a 7:30 kick. I like that. I like the sun cascading on that Hawaii stadium. No more box trucks. Remember 3 years ago during COVID, we had the box trucks going down the highway, Interstate 70. What's up? Turn left. Crazy developments, but it's a nice little stadium. They got a little home field advantage. And I know it's not that far of a trip for Stanford, but I still give the edge right now to Hawaii playing at home. I would lay the 2.5. We'll see how it plays out with Frank Reich. I do believe more in Timmy Chang than I do Frank Reich in the matchup. The other ACC game is a dandy because you have Georgia Tech on the road in Boulder against Deion and the Colorado Buffaloes. Intriguing matchup. Huge matchup for both teams. Can Deion win without Travis Hunter and Shedeur? Can Georgia Tech take off or at least start where they left off? They got to a bowl game. They got smacked in the mouth by Vanderbilt, but they went toe-to-toe with some of the big boys. Knocked off Florida State week number 1, beat Miami, and basically put Miami on life support and had them one shot out before they lost to Syracuse in the college football playoff. And they almost knocked out the Georgia Bulldogs. They have covered now 2 straight games. One at home 2 years ago is a 24-point dog against the Bulldogs. The other last year, catching double digits. They pushed Carson Beck and they pushed that team to the limit in Athens in 8 overtimes. Brent Key and that team solidified the defense. We talked about where they were 2 years ago, giving up 196 rushing yards per game. They got it down to like 122, 123 in that area. More physical. They have one of the more athletic quarterbacks in all of college football in Haynes King. Intriguing matchup. Now, I give the edge to Colorado here. A couple of reasons why. And I know people go, Joe, they're a 14-1 shot to win an ACC championship. Haynes King is a veteran. Brent Key has done a fantastic job. I'm not taking away from him. But if we're talking the spread perspective, we're talking the ability of which team's going to step up, which quarterback, which team. You would think Georgia Tech, but what was the one Achilles heel or one weakness of Georgia Tech last year? They were 2-6 on the road or on a neutral field site last year. 2-6. They lost those games by an average margin of defeat of 9.6 points per game. Now, I know they covered against Georgia. They knocked off Florida State, but they had some bad losses on the road last year. And that is the concern for me going into Boulder, going into that atmosphere, laying 3.5 points. That's Big 12, ACC. Which conference you buying into more? I buy into the Big 12. I buy into Colorado. Now, I know Colorado can't run the football. That is going to be, we have to see and monitor that, right? We have to monitor where Colorado is. Last year only averaged 67 rushing yards per game, right? Averaged well under 3.5 yards per rush. They threw for 318 with Shador and Travis Hunter. But this team was +9 in turnover margin. They won the turnover battle, especially at home. Going up against Haynes King and Dion, I like Caden Salter. I like Julian Lewis. I like whoever starts. I think it'll be Salter, but I think he's a veteran quarterback, and I think he can be a difference maker. I like Colorado in that matchup. I think they win the ball game outright. I like their chances. Plus the 3.5. Give me the Buffaloes in that ball game. The other big matchup, a couple of, and we'll talk about the SEC, but I've been breaking down all the notes in the ACC. Couple of other factors. Jake Dicker takes over Wake Forest, right? Now, that's a 17.5 point number against Kennesaw State. Intriguing, right? Because you got a new scheme. You got Robbie Ashford that's penciled in to be the starter at Wake. That's the former Auburn. That's the former South Carolina quarterback. Now, third time's a charm in Winston-Salem with Jake Dickert. Coached up John Mateer. Can he coach up Robbie Ashford? 17.5 point number. Wake Forest was 4-8 last year. They were also 1-6 at home. Now, I understand different coaching staff. If you watch that game play out, their season really hinged when Calandria and Virginia went on the road and won that battle 31-30. They had an opportunity, Wake Forest, to win that game in the final minute through a critical interception, game over. They couldn't pull it out. And from that point on, they just seemed to walk through the motions, get knocked around. But they lost those 6 games at home last year by an average margin of defeat of 14.8 points per game. Now they're laying 17 points, 17.5 to Kennesaw State. Something smells in that matchup. I'm just saying the line smells. And anything we talk about on the show is always for news and entertainment purposes only. But that line stinks. I mean, it smells. Could it be is it possible a crypto play next week? It's possible. I'll get it going. We'll see. But that line stinks to me. And Robbie Ashford has been a little inconsistent in his career. And I believe part of it is that Hugh Freeze and that team never developed a game plan at Auburn. Shane Beamer had him involved at times. Actually put his team in a position as when Lenora Sellers went down against LSU week 3, week 4. It was Robbie Ashford that led them into field goal range. And then once Sellers was back on their center, that was it. Decided to transfer with Jake Dickert. He is an SEC quarterback playing in the conference of the ACC. We'll see exactly how that fares. Duke takes on Elon. I asked Coach Bowden about can Manny Diaz and Duke potentially not just win 9 games like he did last year, but can he elevate this team to championship status? Credit David Cutcliffe and Mike Elko. They did a fantastic job. Well, Elko did in maintaining the momentum of Cutcliffe. He had one down year and then really built that program up over 9 seasons. Got them to a bowl game against Indiana. You look at this team, they can compete in basketball, and they're at an elite level. Can they compete in the ACC long term? Can Manny Diaz, and what did he learn from his former jobs, right? Bouncing around Miami and then being the DC at Penn State, and then now moving on as a head coach. He lost Malik Murphy to Oregon State. He now has Darian Mensah, and I don't know if anybody saw this, but Mensah is getting $4 million this year. Darian Mensah from Tulane, who was striking it big, the kid hit the lottery. Darian Mensah, $4 million bucks? Are we kidding ourselves? Crazy. But this is the landscape of college football. This is where we're at. Incredible, right? ECU, NC State, that game was amazing because that was the bowl game. NC State leads the all-time series 19-14 overall. ECU has the ability to step up. They're, I believe, 11.5-point underdogs. I'm not big on CJ Bailey. They lost Concepcion, their big play wide receiver, to Texas A&M. How does that obviously fare? He was a pocket rocket, almost like Jalen Samuels was back years ago, right? He was a do-it-yourself type of player. Utilized them in reverses, utilized them with bubble screens, just utilized his versatility. Is no longer there. How does that affect Dave Doran and that crew? Dave Doran in the ACC now for 13 years, 13 seasons with NC State. Is he going to get this team over the hump, or are we going to start to regress? We'll see. We talk about Mike Gundy. We talk about that team in the Big 12, crazy. SEC type of stuff that we broke down that I thought was interesting. A couple of things about the win totals and I apologize, I will have all of the game boards up, but just all of the top 25 and all of the teams that people are high on this year. I know people are high on Austin Simmons and Ole Miss. I was on them last year. You have everything for Ole Miss. You have everything going for you. You have Watkins, you have Trey Harris, you have an experienced quarterback, you have Ulysses Bentley, just a battering ram at the running back position. You have Walter Nolan, that defense coming into one of the best rush defenses in all of college football, holding opposing offense to 80 rushing yards per game. You can't beat DJ Lagway and Billy Napier. I mean, really, it was a potential letdown spot after they knocked off LSU. They come back, they're in the swamp, you start fast, and Jackson Dart, deer in the headlights, and I'm convinced, I thought I saw Lane Kiffin do this in the fourth quarter. It looked like he had the runs. He needed Imodium. Like, give me a break, man. You had everything for the taking there, and they could not step up. Why is it going to happen now with an inexperienced quarterback in Austin Simmons, Walter Nolan in the NFL, Bentley in the NFL, Harris in the NFL? Why now? Why is it going to happen this year on the Grove? You had everything. All the stars were aligned. You knock out Carson Beck. You hold Georgia to basically less than 300 yards of total offense. You hold Carson Beck to 186 passing yards in that game, and you can't get to the playoff because you lost to Billy Napier in the swamp. Now they have an 8.5 win total. All the juice to the over. I can't. It's plus money to the under. Call me crazy, but I can't buy into Lane this year. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll reassess. So, on Lane Kiffin. Tennessee is an interesting one. 10-3 last year. They have the same win total as Ole Miss, 8.5, but they're plus 118 to the over. Joey Aguilar comes over from App State. That team as a whole, right? It's a step up for Joey. But again, you got to believe he's a more consistent quarterback than Nico. I'm sorry. There were games, call it what it is. Everybody wants to defend Nico. Forget the deep balls. Forget the deep shots. Just the ability to pull the football and know where you want to go, to tuck it and run, to utilize your versatility, man. I mean, you got to be kidding me. 3 games for me step out for Nico. The loss to Arkansas, 19-14. The win against Florida, where you're on life support in your house. That was a dead to rights team. I did have Florida plus the 17 in that matchup. I was happy they took it overtime. But that being said, Nico, I mean, really? That terrible performance? And then the performance when Dylan Sampson goes down against Ohio State, you can't rally the troops to make it competitive? Where was the leadership skills? That is the problem. That's why Tennessee does, in fact, get an upgrade this year. It's not going to be easy, I know. But I want to see, I'm taking a wait and see on Tennessee this year. And we talk about the dominance of Clemson. We talk about how these top echelon teams are just dominant at home. Tennessee last year, 7-0 at home. You talk about the FBS wins. FBS wins. Forget the Chattanooga win. We're talking FBS margin of victory, 28.1 points per game. 4 touchdowns at home. They beat their opponents in Knoxville. They beat Alabama last year. Third Saturday of October, they got to go on the road in Tuscaloosa. Can Joey Aguilar do it? You got to show me something. Joey Aguilar, if he's gutty enough, he wins 2 critical road games when it matters. That'll show me whether Josh Heupel and Tennessee are for real. And we'll make that assessment come October, 3rd Saturday around October 20th. I'll know right then and there whether they're good. I talked about Ole Miss there. They were a 6-1 team at home last year, dominant. You have to win at home, but you also have to win in a tough road environment, right? Another team that's interesting, and I feel like they're going under the radar because I feel like they always get pumped up, and this year they haven't been. And it is intriguing to me. When Jimbo Fisher was at Texas A&M, they always were the dark horse, right? Oh, it's this is the year, right? This is the year with Sumlin and then Jimbo and Texas A&M. We're back. We're back. The one year that Texas A&M was back was 2016. It's when they had Trevor Knight. It's when they had Keith Ford, the transfers from Oklahoma. And I picked them to challenge Alabama that year. I thought they could have been a dark horse, right? And they had that game in College Station where the game goes to overtime against Josh Rosen and UCLA, and they win it. It was game 1 of the regular season. They got the win. They got the cover. And they went on a heater. They were 6-0, and I believe they were ranked like top 10 in the country when they faced off against Nick Saban and Alabama. And Christian Kirk catches the football. And they're losing that game 14-13 at half, and they just crapped the bed in the second half. From that moment on, Texas A&M has been irrelevant. I'm sorry, okay? That has been that is the truth. We are a long way away from the wrecking crew. Quentin Coriat and Marcus Buckley and Leland McElroy and, Bucky Richardson and all that. That being said, though, everybody loved Mike Elko. Oh, Mike Elko, the savior. He's gonna solidify Texas A&M as a national power. Beat LSU, smack them around, right? They lose week 1 to Notre Dame, and because Connor Wegman was a deer in the headlights. They lose that week 1 game. They knock off LSU, and then all of a sudden they limp down the stretch. They lose to Texas. But I feel like not a lot of people are talking about them now. Now, they have an 8.5 win total. Marcel Reed, sophomore, comes back. Le'Veon Moss, physical running back. When Le'Veon Moss was in the lineup, Texas A&M was a physical football team, right? Can you get more out of the passing attack? Can Elko in year 2 potentially elevate that defense to the next level? I always say, and what's important, and you saw this with Jim Knowles, not just in Ohio State, but you saw Jim Knowles in Oak State as well. It took a couple of years for Jim Knowles to develop that Big 12 championship caliber type of unit, right? When they challenged Baylor in the Big 12 championship game, Oak State was playing with great third down defense. They were a bend but don't break unit, but they didn't get there overnight. It took a body of work with Jim Knowles to get the right talent and to understand how that talent responded. Same thing with Ohio State. He didn't make them a national championship in year number 1. It took a couple of years till they elevated to the pinnacle. And I always talk about that. Teams being able and coordinators to recognize that talent, recognize how that talent responds in game situations, and then to call a game plan around that talent, right? And that is when you look at everything. Elko, year number 2. Now he's got a better feel about how that talent responds. So maybe that defense will be much better. Maybe they will take the next step from a progression and productivity standpoint. We gotta monitor A&M this year. I want to see the first month of the season. I want to see how that defense is performing. Again, they're on the radar. Am I willing to back them right here and right now? No, but they are a team that we have to monitor in year number 2 with Elko. They have an 8.5 win total. They were 8-5 last year. They had high highs and sometimes low lows. You can't get smacked around by Lenora Sellers in South Carolina when you go to Williams-Brice and lose that matchup by double digits. You can't get slapped. You can't do that. But they're a team that definitely, from a defensive perspective, is on the radar, okay? So that's what we're going to look at in the SEC, and I'll be breaking down all these games throughout the week. I'll be on Saturday for Sports Grid. I'll also be on with Carver. I'll be on all of next week. I said it along with we're going to run it. So I have a ton of stuff to break down college football. I will start breaking down the Baylor-Auburn game. Baylor-Auburn, interesting matchup. You know, I talked to Coach Bowden today about home field advantage in Baylor. And he didn't really believe that it was that much of a home field advantage or one of the more difficult places to play for Auburn, right? And I think what we've seen is a couple of things from the spread perspective. Early, for much of the offseason, Auburn was that 2.5-point favorite. And they were there. 2.5, maybe we saw 3s. And then about maybe 3 weeks ago here in Jersey, we saw the line basically flip. We saw Auburn become a dog, and Baylor became that 2.5-point home favorite, right? And then all of a sudden, the money came back in, and we flipped back to Auburn being a 2.5-point dog. Now, a couple of factors I think that we have to break down, and we'll see how people hit me up on Twitter. I do have the chat. I don't know if it's active, but we'll get that up and going as well. Pendergrass, the starting running back, or one of, right, is out for Baylor. Okay, so that means it's all Bryson Washington. I'm not concerned. I don't think, look, running back, especially in college, you could duplicate productivity. Okay, Pendergrass, good running back. He's not elite. Yes, he was second on the team in terms of production, but as long as the offensive line is opening up holes, I'm not concerned. I think Bryson Washington and that team and Baylor can run the football. It's going to come down to tempo. It's going to come down to, obviously, can they go toe-to-toe with a physical SEC caliber defense? And I think, so that's the first thing. The second thing was you saw Carver's texted me, we're going to be maybe up and running at the top of the hour. The second thing was the way LSU handled Baylor in the bowl game, I think, has got a lot of people saying, well, Auburn should just steamroll the Baylor Bears. I'm not so sure, okay? Couple of reasons why. One, Auburn, and call it what you will, I know they have bright spots. I know they have great talent. That's great, according to a lot of people, but I'm not sold that Auburn's as consistent in the passing attack as Garrett Nussmeier and LSU. No way, shape, or form. Just not happening. There's no way I'm going to compare Auburn's passing attack to LSU's even at the end of the regular season last year. That's number one. Number two, I believe Sawyer Robertson and Baylor are the more experienced offense and the more experienced quarterback. And I understand Jackson Arnold and Ashton Daniels comes in from Stanford. That's all well and good. That's great. But they're learning a new scheme, and all the pressure's on Auburn and Hugh Freeze. And I believe more in Dave Aranda to come up with a defensive game plan to contain those quarterbacks, as opposed to Auburn's defense looking to contain Sawyer Robertson. And Sawyer Robertson, for me, is an under-the-radar quarterback. He's an under-the-radar guy. 28 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, completed well over 63% of his passes. This is a team last year that started 2-4 and then ripped off 6 straight wins before the bowl loss to LSU. They won those games, I just had to double check, 14.8 points per game. They won those games by 14.8 points per game. Dominant. Josh Cameron, an under-the-radar wide receiver. Last year wore number 34. The guy could catch. The guy's one of the most productive receivers in the Big 12. What do you get out of this team? They're going to chuck it. They're going to challenge, whether it be Ashton Daniels and Jackson Arnold, and they're going to go with a 3-headed monster compared to what Hugh Freeze said, and force them to go toe-to-toe with the home team. And I can't buy in. If Auburn can't run the football, they're not going to win this game, because then they're going to be put in third down situations, and then that's Daniels, and that's Jackson Arnold. And I've seen enough of Jackson Arnold in a big spot, Tennessee last year, or Ole Miss last year, where he was a deer in the headlights. Kid couldn't pull his way out if you paid him. And now he's getting paid, but I don't buy into it. As a favorite, I can't do it. So that's what we're looking at. I like Baylor. Total-wise, I'm not so sure just yet. As we inch a little bit closer, do like the total, though, in Hawaii. And I told you that. Hawaii and Stanford, you're getting a couple of points, I believe, in discount. Let me just double-check that here in New Jersey. But that matchup, I think, is down from 52.5 down to 50.5 at last check. Let me just double-check that game. And I'll be on, it's 50.5 now, 2.5-point favorite, minus 125 for Hawaii in that ballgame. I like Hawaii, but I like the over, 50.5. I think we can get there. You would hope that Frank Reich, interim head coach, has a good game plan. We'll see. Another game we haven't touched on just yet that I think is interesting, Maddox Madsen and Boise State on the road against South Florida. That game is in Tampa. Hot, 88, 90 degrees in Tampa, humidity. Boise State, potentially 2 time zones. It's a 5:30 kick. I get that. But I like USF. I like this team at times. Catching 6.5. Are they live? It's possible. It's possible. That's something that will break down a little bit later. The Scott Frost era in UCF starts 17.5 against Jacksonville State. Do you give the edge to, obviously, Scott Frost, with Rich Rod now moving on to West Virginia? Coach and I are going to get into that as well. Let's not forget, Rich Rod on Terry Bowden's staff at UL Monroe, his first season there. His son was the quarterback. Rich Rod was the offensive coordinator. And Coach Bowden does know the Sun Belt and some of these teams and head coaches. Got a ton of coordinators that coached under him. We'll be breaking down that. Here's something to keep an eye on, okay? And I always talk about this. This Wyoming game, Wyoming and Akron, another intriguing game. The reason why, and Akron sucks, I get that. Akron not bowl eligible, I get it. But we continue to talk about personnel going up in a week 1 matchup. Now, Akron, can they exploit a secondary in Wyoming that is starting 3 freshmen? I don't care that they're redshirt freshmen. I don't care they're freshmen. They're young. They're inexperienced. They're starters now, and they have to communicate as a unit going on the road to Akron. That is a situation where I believe either the total or the Zips potentially could be live. And I can now, in a perfect world, I would want it to be anybody else than Akron or a MAC opponent. I would at least hope that it would be like, an American or even a a Mountain West team like Wyoming. The fact that it's Akron is a little scary because we know how bad they are. But from the total perspective, Akron, we might even look team total in that matchup because I believe they could be vulnerable, Wyoming can, from a defensive perspective. 3 freshmen in the secondary. There's a few situations where this matters. And you talk about, what do you talk about inexperience? I talk about freshmen. I talk about transfer talent coming in that are underclassmen outside of juniors and seniors. That's important for me. Doesn't matter that they were a starter at Iowa, starter at Kansas State. If they were a younger player and they're in a new scheme, in a new type of situation and a new team, that is a cause that I want to try and potentially monitor. And I told you, Miami's in that situation. 4 new starters in the secondary with a new coordinator going up against a top 10 opponent, potentially in Notre Dame. That could potentially be Notre Dame. That could be the over. That could be potentially CJ Carr as it relates to his passing props. That's what I want to monitor. I told you, Wyoming, 3 freshman starters in the secondary. Freshmen, not sophomores. They're going on the road to Akron. Wyoming, 7.5-point favorite. A little bit light. That's a light number considering how bad Akron is. We have to see. I sort of lean, and again, everything is for news and entertainment purposes only. I lean to Akron in that matchup, and I lean to the over because I want to see if the Zips can exploit that type of secondary for Wyoming. We're just getting started. Again, this is the first, or this is my second or third podcast. You can hit me up on Twitter. I'll be here. I'll be breaking down all the top 25 battles. I'll give you plays. I'll talk storylines. I'll have coaches' perspective. We have a bunch of podcasts coming out on the Go for the Two Radio Network that we're all just breaking it down and getting involved. If you want to talk about other games, and obviously the big ones for week 1 will be more in-depth next week as we inch closer. I'll be on air potentially Tuesday and Thursday when those games kick off. Friday might be a little light due to those matchups. I'll look across the board, see what else stands out to me early on. Just see if there's anything else I missed prior to this. The Miami of Ohio, Wisconsin game, okay? I just want to double check this for a second. Miami O and Wisconsin. That's interesting to me because I am on Wisconsin for the win total, okay? I am on them for the win total because of 2 factors. Luke Fickell has his back against the wall, and I believe that if he doesn't get at least to 7 or 8 wins, he potentially could be gone. Now, people say you're crazy. Well, 3 years ago, he could have written anywhere he wanted. He could have went to USC. He could have went maybe to Ohio State. You name it, Luke Fickell was the hottest commodity. He didn't want to leave the area and took the job at Wisconsin. They've gone down like a dart. Well, they square off with Miami of Ohio. And what I find interesting is that Toledo's former quarterback, Daquan Finn, transferred to Miami O. We talk about all these quarterback transfers. Now, Daquan Finn did not live up to expectations, lost his job at the end of the regular season in Toledo. He goes to Miami of Ohio, still playing in the MAC, against basically a Big Ten defense. I want to see this game play. I lean to Wisconsin in this matchup. Now, typically, Wisconsin over the past few seasons has not been good against out-of-conference opponents. This is a must-win, show-out game for Luke Fickell. Laying 17.5, I think they can potentially dominate this matchup. Again, Daquan Finn, has the potential to break games open. We'll see. I like Wisconsin playing at home. The other intriguing line is Cincinnati catching the 6.5 against Nebraska. And Matty Rule came out. Matty Rule. He came out with the podcast today, dropping it. I'm all in for the black shirts. They're breaking out the old school black shirts. Mike Minter, Ralph and Mike Brown. Jay Foreman, the Peters brothers, you name it. And let me just say, Damon Benning, Derek Brown, all those I-backs back in the day, Keith Jones, Dan Alexander, and Robin Miller. Unbelievable. Let me tell you, there was Willie Miller, number 15. I mean, you name it. They had it back in the days of Solich. And it wasn't until Pelini ran that program into the ground that they're still trying to recover. But 6.5? 6.5 against Cincinnati? Cincinnati was gutty last year. I know only 5 wins, but there were times where Cincinnati pushed some teams to the limit, pushed Joey McGuire and Texas Tech. Hey, Joey. And I've been reaching out to Joey McGuire. We're hopefully getting on the horn. He gave me his SI. We'll hopefully get him on with Coach Bowden and myself. But that is another fishy line. 6.5. I mean, Dominic Raiola and Nebraska, they get pushed to the limit by Cincinnati and Ohio. Don't come back to Lincoln, Matt. Seriously. You made it to a bowl game. Congrats. First time since 2014, since you played in the Music City Bowl. Everybody's all well and good. But now let's get back to an elite level of play. Let's get back to 9 or 10 wins where we were at the start of the decade in 2000, 2001 with those teams that we used to go toe-to-toe with Colorado. Okay? And Corey Ross back in the day, number 22, is a high school coach now. Was one of my favorite running backs, number 22. That's when they had the Adidas contract, and they used to play Arizona State. Remember, they boat raced them in the early decade. But we'll see. We'll see. That game is on my radar. I haven't really dove into it as much, but we'll see. Childs and Michigan State against Western Michigan, another intriguing matchup. I mentioned how Wake Forest was 1-6 at home last year. That's a cause of concern. I told you the Auburn game, the Colorado game. I know Carver's high on Dan Mullen and UNLV against Sam Houston State. That game, that doesn't really move the needle for me because, again, you're going from Barry Odom that had this team at an elite level to Dan Mullen that never coached defense in any capacity, can run the football, and I have no worries about the offense. I am worried about the defense going up against Sam Houston State, 58.5 point total. I mentioned the total in Colorado. That's an interesting number, too. The 58.5. Is it 58.5? Let me just double check this. Colorado, where is it? I just lost it now. 54.5. I lean to the under there. And the reason why I say that is we know Haynes King. We know Jamal Haynes. Caden Salter, you want to utilize his legs. Colorado struggled last year running the football. I mentioned 67 rushing yards per game. Do you establish the run with a new quarterback? Does that lead to time of possession? Sort of like the under in Georgia Tech, Colorado. I know that it seems like, and it screams over. Not so sure about that. I lean to the under in that matchup. Baylor, Auburn total, 57.5, up and away. Because I think Sawyer Robertson and that team are going to push tempo. Now, if Auburn wins the war in the trenches, dead under. Then they won't be able to get anything off, and then Auburn maybe runs away with it. I don't see that right now. I think tempo could be a factor for the Auburn defense. So give me the total, 57.5. I lean to the over there. Again, everything is for news and entertainment purposes only. Looking at some of the other totals, Buffalo, Minnesota, 44.5, lean, not really on the radar. I'll just bring this up before I go. UT Martin and Oak State. You got to make a statement if you're Mike Gundy. Okay, you have Todd Grantham there, a journeyman defensive coordinator. And talk about these guys, these retreads. They haven't gotten it right since Jim Knowles. Todd Grantham, that defense, Their Miami transfer, the safety that came over, he's kicked off the team. Already some internal issues with Oklahoma State. Mike Gundy could be gone. They have a 4.5 win total. I don't think they get over that. I think defensively, they're not going to be as good as they were, not even last year. Forget it. Dating back to pre-Derek Mason days, I think they're a dead under team, and I don't know their identity from an offensive perspective. But that total, 55.5, that seems way too high for an offense that, to me, is going to struggle passing the football. We'll see. If UT Martin puts up some points, then they'll sail through it. But in game number one, lean to the under in that matchup. 22.5, don't really like either side in the ball game. So that's it for today. I'll be back next week. I'll be on with Carver a little bit later. We'll be breaking down all of these matchups. This is I Said It with Joe Lisi. Text me, hit me up on Twitter. I'll break down all the matchups as we enter this coming weekend and obviously week number one. Just getting started, guys. College football is the best. See you next week.